A Touch of Pink by Margaret Smeaton, 1,000 words. It was a treasured possession in Maggie's family, a beautiful black lacquered photo album. On the front cover, inlaid with iridescent mother of pearl all the colours of the rainbow, was a Japanese pagoda with cherry blossom trees in bloom. But the real treasure was inside the album. Photographs of a past life spent in post-war Japan. Peter, her father, an enlisted officer in the Australian Army Corps, had been transferred to Japan in October 1946 as part of the British Commonwealth Occupation Forces, or BCOF. Maggie, Edna her mother, and little sister Robin followed him to Japan in November 1947. They lived in Nijimura, or the Rainbow Village in Kure, Hiroshima, so called because of the multicoloured homes built for service families. Maggie had little memory of her life back then, as she was only 2 years old and Robin was 18 months younger. However, looking back at the photos of that time, life seemed idyllic. Her mother had servants, house girls to help with meals and housework, and a mama-san to look after the children. Maggie loved the photos of herself and Robin in kimonos, at birthday parties, swimming at the pool and at kindy. There were also pictures of her mum and dad with friends at army social events, and everyone looked so happy. Looking at the photos, Maggie knew that the happiness hadn't lasted. On the 20th of June 1949, her baby sister Patty, Patricia Ann, was born at the hospital in Kure, Japan. She had no memories of Patty, but the photos made her very real. She was a beautiful baby, and there were many photos of the three of them, Maggie, Robin and Patty. Patty only lived to be 9 months of age and died on the 11th of March 1950, a day before her mother's birthday. She was buried in Japan. The last photo taken was of a lonely grave marked with a white cross with Patty's name and dates of her birth and death. Over the years, Maggie thought of Patty often, usually when watching a sunrise or a sunset. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it had something to do with Japan being the land of the rising sun. She always felt sad thinking of that lonely grave. Her baby sister, alone, thousands of miles from home. Maggie wanted to bring her back to Australia, but knew that wasn't possible. She didn't even know where Patty was buried. The years passed, but Patty was still very much part of the family. The photo album still treasured and pored over on visits home. As adults, Maggie and Robin and younger brother Peter had made their own copies of many of the photos, for which they were thankful when a fire in the family home destroyed the album. Many photos were blackened and burnt around the edges, but able to be salvaged. Maggie's mum cried tears of joy, knowing those treasured photos, irreplaceable memories of Patty, had been saved. Many more years later, social media became popular and Maggie signed up. She had been on the internet researching information about the family's time in Japan and couldn't believe it when a group popped up on Facebook called BCOF Kids. Its members were all children of men who had served in the occupation forces, and she immediately joined up. There were many photos of Maggie and her family on the site that she had never seen before. The group was planning a reunion in Canberra, and Maggie was determined to go. That trip was a catalyst for her decision to find out where Patty was buried and to return to Japan. On arrival back to Brisbane, she rang Veterans Affairs. Her family's life in Japan had been so long ago, she wasn't hopeful, but thanks to research done online, she was able to supply all the information needed. A few hours later, the phone rang and a young woman spoke. "Miss Smeaton, we have managed to locate the burial site of Patricia Ann Smeaton. She's buried in the Yokohama War Cemetery in Japan." Maggie couldn't speak. Tears rolled down her cheek as she tried to thank the woman, who continued, "If you give me your email address, I can forward some photographs and a map of the cemetery showing exactly where she is." 3 months later, armed with the map and photographs, Maggie was on her way to Japan. Even though it was only over 50 years since she had lived there, it felt like coming home. Edna, her mother, had always told her that Japanese had been her first language, so it sounded very familiar. A contact in Japan had been suggested by a member of the Beekoff Kids group, an Australian priest whose church was in Yokohama, and he would accompany Maggie to the cemetery. On the day, Maggie didn't know how she felt. She had little or no memory of Paddy, but still felt the connection. And she had been driven by something inside to find her baby sister. The priest knew exactly where Paddy was and linked arms with Maggie as they walked over to the Australian section of the cemetery. Just as well, as soon as Maggie saw the plaque engraved with Paddy's name, her legs gave way and she crumpled to her knees. Many years of grief buried deep down inside surfaced, and she shook with sobs, finally able to place all that emotion where it belonged, with her little sister. When Maggie arrived back in Australia, she didn't bring Paddy back with her. The Yokohama War Cemetery was the most peaceful resting place she could have wished for. The Australian section had been planted with flowering gum trees and was beautifully maintained by the Japanese gardeners. Paddy was in a row of children's graves, so she wasn't alone, and Maggie felt at peace with her decision to leave her there undisturbed. There was a touch of pink in the sunset that night, and Maggie no longer felt sad. The end.